Welcome to High Stakes. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn. On this show, I chat with authors about the moments in their stories that change everything, what's at stake, what it costs, and why we can't look away. From thrillers to romance to sci-fi and beyond. Let's get to it. Joining me today is USA Today bestselling author Jon Lindstrom to talk about his new thriller, Hollywood Payback. Welcome to the show, Jon.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and I mentioned to you before, I'm just really digging that room you're in.
Thank you. I dig it too.
Yeah, you notice I blur mine. I'm in temporary digs down here in Atlanta.
That's where I had the same problem, not problem, but I had the same issue last week whenever I was at a rental, and I tell you, sometimes it can be really hard to find a good a good
A,
background
a good
with
background, yeah.
appropriate lighting. You got to have it all right. All right, perfect. Well, I think you have a copy of your book there. If we could see that
I
beautiful
do.
cover. Isn't that nice? That is so great. Crooked Lane did such an amazing job on these covers. They have
They
that
did.
old Hollywood feel and just,
Yeah.
yeah, there
And
you
it
go.
makes a great companion piece to Hollywood Hustle. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, they
awesome.
really, really worked hard on it all. I'm going to silence this phone here. I'm going
Great.
to say, do not disturb. Okay, there we
Well,
go.
I am so happy to have you here. And I should also mention that if John looks and sounds familiar, he's also a four-time Emmy Award nominee, an award-winning filmmaker, and he narrates audiobooks. You, my friend, are the full creative package. My hat's off to you for sure.
Oh, I'm just really tired.
I can imagine you are probably running around quite a lot with all of those different hats for
Quite a
sure.
lot. Actually, I just finished listening to the quality control copy of the audio for Hollywood Payback, which I also narrated. So all that tends to fall on the authors now, you know.
Yeah,
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 give
it
a
sure
read, give
does.
a listen, yeah. But I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it. I found
Yeah.
exactly one glitch.
Oh, perfect.
In
That's
eight and a
great.
half hours of book listening to myself, I found one glitch. Yeah.
How is it listening to yourself? I know I've heard some actors will not watch their finished film or series or what
Mhm.
have you. How is it as a narrator listening to yourself?
It's not quite as agonizing as watching yourself on screen, which
Yeah.
is rather agonizing. All you
Is it?
see is everything you did wrong. And you tend to do that when you listen to yourself too. But the good news was, uh, like when I narrated Hollywood Hustle, which I also did, uh, I realized that Hollywood Payback is pretty good.
Great. Well,
I thought, hey,
that's
you know what? This book's not so bad.
hopefully that wasn't too big of a surprise for you.
Yeah.
I'm
It
hoping.
was big enough, but not
Yeah.
unexpected. So yeah, all good.
Yeah. Well, what led to I guess what led to you taking the leap into writing novels with all of the other things that you're doing? What made you want to write a book?
Well, that's kind of a big question, but I think having written several screenplays and gotten into filmmaking and even directed one of my own screenplays, um, I I can be a little bit flip, but there is truth to it when I say I just didn't want to sit in another development meeting and argue over some story point with somebody who may or may not know anything about storytelling.
Yeah.
Um, and gosh, I just really wanted that experience of sitting in a room and writing every day just for the
Hmm.
sake of doing it. And I had no plot, I had no outline. I never seemed to do that. But when I started writing Hollywood Hustle, my first book, I just sat down early one morning and started typing. And, 8 or 9 months later, that's what came out. Same thing with Hollywood Payback. I didn't know where I was going. I just had an idea for a character. And maybe that's it.
Hmm.
Being an actor for so long, I think there's a real joy for me in just investigating a character as fully as I can,
Hmm.
you know. And I just didn't want anybody telling me what to do.
Hey, I get it.
You get it, yeah.
I get it. I absolutely get it. Well, I had some questions that was going to really touch on that a little bit about character. And that was I had read Hollywood Hustle and or actually listened to it. So I listened to the audiobook
Thank you.
and it was amazing. And in Hollywood Hustle, just like in Hollywood Payback, you have such layered characters,
Thank you.
especially, the primary or the main character. And you just, I mean, like I said, we'll touch on this a little bit later, but I wondered at as I was reading this one, not your first one, because I didn't, as I was reading your first one, I didn't connect who you were as an actor with who you
Mm.
were as an author right away. And it just seemed to me that the character building, whether it's just organic or whether you sat down and kind of worked it out and did interviews and everything, you just did an amazing job with it because Jake in this story, his past especially, he has some very he made some very interesting decisions that
He made some really bad choices.
yeah, okay, all right. I'll let you say that one.
You
Yes,
could go ahead and say
he made
that.
some bad choices that, some readers might not have cared for, as they're reading it. But I thought it made him such an interesting person, and I really, really wanted to figure out or learn, I should say, what happens at the end. How is he going to get through all this? How is he going to change in this book? And how is he going to get out of this, this kind of tough situation that you put him in? So I mean, really, it was amazing how you worked through that with him, and so
Thank you very
great
much.
job.
That that's doubly gratifying. Not only because there's two timelines in the book, but
Hmm.
it's also it was everybody said your second book is going to be the hardest one to write, and it was.
Yeah.
I've since written another book since then, and it came so easily. I was a collaboration with somebody, but I realized that I got over that hump. But I don't know, something about Hollywood Payback. I felt like I kind of wanted to swing for the fences.
Hmm.
I don't like to repeat myself, which is why when I sat down at Thriller Fest for the first time to pitch to try and get my book published and to find an agent and all of that, I knew that I didn't want to write a series about one character.
Mm.
I just can't. I just don't see myself doing it now, and I'm not knocking the guys because
Yeah.
that people that can, because I was a huge fan of Sue Grafton and Kinsey Malone. And I'm a huge fan and had the honor to work with Michael Connelly on the Bosch series. And I started reading Harry Bosch 20 years ago. So I mean, I have great respect and probably more admiration for that than even doing my own books. but but I knew that I wanted to write books that were set in the same world, not about the same people.
Hmm.
And writing Winston Green and Hollywood Hustle was somebody that I knew. I
Okay.
knew those guys. I knew, and I'd certainly come across the Tom Sizemores and Michael Madsen's, these brilliantly talented guys who had had a huge climb and then crashed and had to get their lives back, and they did at the end before they passed away. They were stable, and that's the premise I used for that. For Jake Ferguson, I think I really wanted to kind of honor those guys because, but for the grace of God go I have a career, and one that's sustained me for 30, 40 years now.
Hmm.
And I knew a lot of those fellows who tried and tried and tried, and some of them broke. I mean,
Mm.
really broke apart spiritually and emotionally, and made stupid choices and got into all the wrong things. And and I do remember one, at least one, maybe two of them that did get sent off to prison because of
Mm.
the choices they made. And I don't think they would have made it had the toll of trying to break into a dream that Hollywood represents hadn't taken such a big chunk out of them,
Yeah.
out of their soul, really, and kind of robbed them of their ability to make good choices.
Well, I could definitely feel that in Payback, and I think what I really loved about Hustle and Payback is that you didn't focus on the glitz and the glam or the people with the heaps of
No.
money. Your characters struggle. They live on the fringe of that industry, which I found really refreshing. And you're talking about some of the struggles of trying to break in. You had several, or Jake thought about several of his audition disasters, and it made
Yeah.
me wonder, were these things that you had experienced or friends of yours had experienced, or were those just completely, made up in you made up in your mind?
I smiled there because somebody asked me, gee, John, why don't you write a memoir? And I said, my fiction books are as close to memoir as I'm ever gonna get. You're never gonna get a memoir out of me, man. Um, I can say that many of those situations, yes, and I have to give credit to my editor at Crooked Lane Books, Jess Verdi. When I first wrote Jake's giving up on Hollywood, I really glossed over it. And she went, you know what, John, I was an actor at one time, and I think you're avoiding something here.
Mm, mm,
Yeah. And I said,
yeah,
you know what, Jess, you're right. You're absolutely right. So give me a month and I will go back in there. And I've been working in Atlanta here for, over a year now. And I took a vacation. I went down to Savannah for about 5 days, and I spent 5 days in a hotel revisiting
yeah,
all those humiliating experiences that everybody has.
yeah,
And there are people out there, I took pains to try to point out the people that were kind and supportive and wanted you to succeed. But I can't, man, I don't have enough fingers and toes to point out the people that really shouldn't be in those rooms at
yeah,
those times. It's a very, very difficult thing to do, to learn an audition and go into this tiny room of people and try to convince them with your talent and ability that you're the right guy for something. And there are some people there that really just can't wait to try to flex their muscles
yeah,
in front of everyone else, and they're happy to use you as an example.
yeah,
I can't tell you. I even said about Jake. It took me everything in me. When I say it took everything in me, I mean it took everything not to throw this arrogant son of a bitch out the window.
yeah,
And I'm at 6'1", I'm over 200 pounds. I probably could have done it,
yeah.
but you can't. You just can't. You can't risk your reputation, and you have other people that got you into that room. You can't ruin their relationships. There's just too much to think about. So you don't do it. You suck it up is what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those, and unfortunately when you have to suck it up like that, those individuals who are just nasty, like some of the examples that you had in your stories, they just go on being nasty because they get away with it, right? Which is just a
Yeah.
really sad part of the story, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I'm happy to say that none of those people that I encountered before I was able to, get out of the restaurant business myself.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know where any of them are. I I, I think maybe their behavior caught up to them because
Good.
eventually it will.
Good. Yeah.
Eventually it does, one way or another it does. But I guess maybe Hollywood Payback and what Jake Ferguson experienced, maybe it's kind of timely for this time we're living in. We
Yeah.
seem to be living in the age of the narcissist. So
Mhm.
maybe
Oh,
people can relate to
absolutely.
it,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
hopefully take something away from that. I
Did you
hope.
find the experience, those 5 days that you went away and you wrote that scene, did you find that experience in the end cathartic?
I think I did to a point. A couple of actor friends have read it and they said, "Oh boy, John, I had just that same thing." But I think what surprised me more was that I thought I had put a lot of those experiences behind me. And still, here I was 30 years later and I was writing those
Mm,
scenes. And man, I was getting angry. I was
yeah,
really getting angry thinking about those rooms and those experiences. Um, I mean, my great justification about it is that, I can say, hey man, I'm here. I got a
right.
career. I got four
Absolutely.
Emmy nominations. Where are
Yeah,
you now?
yeah,
But yeah, those things took a toll. And I
yeah,
think on the one hand, maybe it helped drive me because I think I heard, God, I think it was the late great Madeline Kahn talking on one of those talk shows, that she was describing. There is a little bit of a "I'll show you" attitude that you have to have.
yeah,
You think I can't make it? Well, I'll show you.
yeah,
And I believe that I had some of that going on.
yeah.
I really do. I think that there were times where I just said, you know what, I am not going to listen to those people, and I'm gonna show them that they're wrong, and that's part of what helped me keep going.
Yeah.
But I was very much surprised. I don't know if it's cathartic because if I sit and think about it like I am right now,
Get mad again.
I can feel it kind of coming up.
Okay. All right. Well, we don't want to
Yeah,
get you mad again. Yeah, we don't want you to
it's
have
okay.
to
I won't throw
traumatize you
anybody
like
out a
that again.
window or anything.
Did you have an agent that as Jake did in this story, did you have an agent that helped you through, some of
I
those rough
I did.
patches? Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
great.
did. I had a guy. He's no longer in the business now. He was, older than me. He was an older gay man. Never made a move on me. And he really, really loved the business and he loved his clients. And his downfall was that he was a terrible alcoholic.
Mm,
And but he really stuck with me. He
yeah,
stuck
that's
with me
great.
for years. And me personally, I it broke my heart when the day came that I had to let him go because it was his drinking was just out of control.
Mm,
And I had people say, "Hey John, one of your flaws is you're too loyal."
oh,
Maybe I
yeah.
am. I'm as loyal
Yeah.
as I am, and I just can't see throwing somebody out of the boat. Just because there's only one bottle of water left. We can share
Hmm.
that. There's enough to go around if you give somebody time.
Yeah.
And but unfortunately, he just ran out of time.
Yeah.
But those people are very important to whether or not you're going to make it anywhere.
Yeah.
I have a book agent now, Liza Fleisig, who I met at Thriller Fest before I was published, or I wasn't even done with my first book, but we decided to work together. And she's that person for me in the
Yeah.
publishing world.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, we have teased a lot about Hollywood Payback, so this might be a good time for you to tell us what the book is about. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah, I guess so. People tuning in are going, what are they talking about anyway? I kind of describe Hollywood Payback as the anti-Hollywood hustle. Have you seen the movie Jay Kelly?
Yes, I did with
Okay. With
uh
George
George
Clooney.
Clooney. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And Billy Crudup was the guy in
Yeah.
class with him. Well, if Hollywood Hustle would be Jay Kelly, with Winston Green, and Hollywood Hustle
Okay.
would be Jay Kelly, in Hollywood Payback, Jake Ferguson would be the Billy Crudup character,
Okay.
the guy
All
who
right.
didn't make it
Yeah.
and has a chip on his
Yeah.
shoulder. Um, yeah, he's the guy who was in class with Winston Green. There's even a little cameo with Winston. in Hollywood
Yeah.
Payback. But Jake Ferguson, I would describe him as a once promising actor who went off the rails and made some terrible choices and wound up being sent to prison. And his bad luck was a time when something in California called the felony murder rule. And if you were involved in a crime where someone dies, whether or not you pulled the trigger, you were tried and sentenced as if you had. And that's, Jake had a lot of bad luck things happen to him, but that was probably the biggest one. And even though he turns on his cohorts and testifies against them, doesn't matter. You're going down
Yeah.
for with the same kind of conviction and punishment that somebody who pulled the trigger would have. So that was his problem, and that's I tell the story in two timelines. One is the road that Jake gets on when he's young, and his struggles and his relationships and the bad choices that he ends up making that ultimately send him to prison. The second timeline picks up the day he gets out, actually
Yeah.
the morning after. And that's the contemporary timeline of how he wants to go and redeem himself. And can he find it in himself and in the people that he left behind to reach some place of deliverance and forgiveness and redemption? Doesn't go quite so well.
Yeah. No, I was really curious. In the dual timeline, whenever he was a young man, he engaged in a profession, and I was curious if that was a hard sell for your agent and editor, or did
No,
you? No,
no,
no
you're talking
problem.
about when he decides to during his early years he decides to become a gigolo.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's somebody kind of lures him into that world, and no, nobody has brought it up. Not a
Okay,
single.
all
You're the
right.
first, actually.
Oh my gosh, that's
Congratulations,
great.
Tracy.
No, I think that's
No, I
amazing. I'm glad to hear
nobody. Yeah,
that. I'm
yeah,
glad to hear it
nobody has
wasn't.
brought that up. It seemed, and maybe, well, you know what we say about writers: we don't write, we just report. I like I say, I knew some of those guys who were doing some really stupid things,
Yeah,
and a couple of them. And I worked at a restaurant called Morton's, which was at that time the place for Hollywood to go. It had very
yeah,
flattering lighting, and the food was good. It wasn't great, but it was very clubby. And it was studio executives and top talent agents and movie stars and a lot of people who wanted to get close to all those people. And there were some of the guys who we really joked. Um, we used to laugh that our job interview to work at Morton's restaurant included bringing a headshot so they could see how good looking are you. I mean they were smoking. These guys were
yeah,
just and the waiters and the waitresses and even the cooks in the open kitchen were good looking.
yeah.
And people wanted to be around that. Some of the guys, not many, but a couple of them, wound up going into business. I'll meet you after work, or I'm off
Yeah.
tomorrow. And some of the wealthier women, sometimes men for them, would pay them for their time,
Yeah.
and they would supplement their income that way.
And I think if you had just made a mention that he was a gigolo in his earlier life, I wouldn't have thought about it, but you did such an amazing job taking me, the reader, into his world and how he got to that point to make that decision and how he thought making that decision would kind of get him out of a bad situation. And it was kind of like gut-wrenching. And I think because you walked us through it, I think that to me was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, an agent or editor, or mostly an editor, would be okay with the main character with this background. But I'm just really glad that they were open to that and had no issue because You know, we most characters who have kind of storied pasts like that are the most interesting characters.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I think I just felt that if I were going to take Jake down that road, he had to earn it.
Hmm.
As me as a writer has to give it to a reader in a way that feels like we've earned this.
Yeah.
And if you stop and think about it, wow. I mean, happily I can say that I was never even faced with that. I never had to do it.
Yeah.
I did have a couple of offers. I turned them down. But the point being, I thought, wow, what if you find yourself in that situation?
Hmm.
This isn't going to be some romantic getaway to, running off to the Ojai Inn, or
Yeah.
down to San Diego or to Santa Barbara or something like that. No, it's going to be some sordid, seamy experience with someone that you otherwise never would be with.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, what could that be like? Happily, I used my imagination.
Good deal. Good deal.
Yeah, yeah. But again, I just think, you have to earn it. And what's the cost? What
Yeah.
price do you pay for making that kind of a choice?
Yeah. Yeah, his last gig was quite gut-wrenching to,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I felt so bad for him.
Good. So did
Um
I.
I really loved Jake's insights into prison life, what it took for him to survive. He talked about the ways in which Hollywood, you know, can get it wrong. And
Yeah.
again, I found that angle so refreshing. What led to your, I guess, your decision to go that way as opposed to,
Well,
going the Hollywood way, I guess.
Well, the concept for me was always I wanted to write a story about a guy who came out of prison and what did that mean psychologically to
Hmm.
to him. But along my travels, the great thing about coming into publishing is I've made a lot of new friends, and I had a friend many years ago who's still one of my best friends, a TV showrunner named Lynn Marie Latham. She created, I think, 12 different primetime series. But she always said to me, John, she's from Texas, John, writers are always the most helpful of all. And being an actor, I would go, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Sure they are, Lynn. But she has been proven right time and time again. Now, one of the people that I met is, you probably know him, the wonderful novelist James Latoile.
Oh yeah, my buddy.
Now,
Yeah, he's my
Jim,
buddy. Yeah.
yeah, Jim, he's one of my buddies too. He's one of the
Yeah,
greatest guys. And
he is.
a lot of people don't realize Jim was a penologist. He was
Yeah.
raised on the grounds at Folsom Prison. I think his father was a guard there, but he followed his father's footsteps, became a penologist, worked throughout the California state prison system, but still lives up there outside Sacramento, where Folsom is located. So when you meet somebody like that, you'd be a fool not to reach out
Yeah.
and say,
Yeah,
am I
absolutely.
getting this right, Jim? I have some questions for you. And Jim he was so forthcoming. And so I made sure I would send him these things and say, do I have this right?
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
do I have it wrong? And he would always be very straight up with me and just say, you can mostly you got it right, John, but really let's look at the respect thing inside the
Okay.
walls. Let's
Yeah.
let's
Yeah. Yeah.
talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about how gangs are separated by race, and they
Hmm.
always are.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. um so I mean, he just turned out to be an invaluable thing, for
Yeah.
me, an invaluable resource.
He is the sweetest man too, and you have to
Mm,
wonder, somebody who has been in that system for so long, how he's not more jaded and cynical and all of these other things. But he's
yeah.
just the nicest guy.
The
It's
nicest
amazing.
man in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I think he understands the sense of irony because,
Mm.
he told me when he would come home from school at the age of 10, and the guy mowing the lawn on the ride around lawnmower would give Jim a ride. and
Oh.
let him steer and all that. And he said, yeah, that guy was in for triple murder, you know. But he had earned the trust of
Yeah.
the institution that he could go out and mow the lawn and even give rides to
Ten-year-olds.
one of the guys' kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Amazing.
mean there is a sense of irony in that.
There is. There is. Well, on this show, we like to talk about the story stakes. I always joke, love, death, and the fate of the realm. They're all high stakes in the story, which we love. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on what's personally at stake for Jake in this story.
Well, when you get down to the real physical nuts and bolts, it's his life. His life
Hmm.
is at stake. And that's always great stakes to play for, right?
Yeah,
you know, but
absolutely.
but when he comes out, I think when he steps out of prison and has to really follow through on this goal, this dream that he's had to make up for the mistakes that he made, there's something about his own individual dignity, his ability to look himself in the mirror without regret. And I think for any human being, I mean, we talk a lot now about, dignity, just personal dignity. Um, I think we forget how really important that is.
Yeah.
And that's something that he's struggled and struggled and struggled to maintain all of his life. And now this is the first time that he really has the chance to know it, to really feel it for himself.
Mhm.
So, the irony is in his attempt to chase that dignity and by way of redemption is what puts him into a bad situation again, and where his life and the lives of these people that he cares about, one that he's always cared about, one that he newly cares about, are really threatened. So what does
Yeah.
he give up? I think he's willing to give up his chance at dignity in order to save their lives.
Yeah. I love that. That's great. All right. Well, we're going to switch gears just a little bit for the last couple of questions here as we end the
Okay.
interview. What is one thing readers might be surprised to learn about you?
Uh, that I like to watch Kitchen Nightmares.
Nice.
I'll even watch reruns on Hulu.
That's
Because
great. That
I
is
just
great.
love it when Gordon Ramsay goes, "Shut it down! Shut it down!"
Gordon, I tell you.
Yeah.
Hell's Kitchen. I used to watch Hell's Kitchen all the time. It
Oh,
was
that's a great one too.
yeah. And then my last burning question is, why is Noodle the world's most unwalkable dog?
Noodle, you want to take that one? He's under the bed right now. I really he has never Noodle's a rescue,
Yeah.
and I picked him up off of Facebook when a friend of mine, a casting director named Victoria Burrows, who I've known almost my entire career, she now casts like Peter Jackson movies and Robert Zemeckis movies.
Yeah.
She's really a
Yeah.
top flight casting director, but she runs an animal rescue,
Oh.
and she posted a picture of Noodle on Facebook. Can anybody take him? I got no room left because her house was always filled with animals that she'd rescued. I got no room. Can somebody just take him for a couple of weeks? And I saw that picture and I just, oh, I'll fine,
So cute.
Victoria, I'll take him. Don't worry, I'll take him. Not knowing that I would fall in love with him and
Yeah.
keep him now 14 years later. Um, but there was something about him. He came with a broken leg.
Oh,
Somebody had
okay.
abused him and kicked him. And truly, his right rear leg was dangling. So there was that. And cars made him very nervous.
Hmm.
I mean, to the point where he would just shake. I got to drug him to get him on a plane.
Okay.
But I wonder if that broken leg had something to do with it because he just will not walk the way other dogs will. And he has this, like, what I call nuclear nose. I mean, every dog has an amazing sense of smell. But if you were in the other room right now, like back around the corner, and he was here with me now, and you opened a jar, and it's not that sound, that thunk sound. I've seen him actually go, as soon as that lid opens, I've seen him go
Whoop.
Yeah, he smells it right away. So
Amazing.
he has all these other great attributes about him. He is the most loving, sweet, cuddly dog,
Yeah.
but he just doesn't walk. I don't get it.
I get the
Even when there's
pick.
another dog down there that he wants to play with, he doesn't like pick up the pace or anything. He just kind of wants to stand there and take his time and sniff. That's what he does. Yeah, makes
That's
him
good.
or his own mark. He trots by his own drummer.
Yeah. You've posted obviously some videos that I watched on your social media, and it's like you're talking, all of a sudden it's like, okay, where are you at, Noodle?
Yeah,
It's
where'd you
like,
go? And you see
where'd you
him.
go?
He's way
Yeah.
back there, still sniffing the same stone
Uh,
that he found 10 minutes before.
well, at least he comes back. If I let my dog Cooper off a leash like that, he would be like, bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't do that either.
That's great. Well, before we go, can you share what's coming up next?
Uh, I would like to mention this anthology. This contains Hollywood Kills, contains the
Yeah.
first short story that I ever got published. It's called Stalker. You can uh, you can infer what you want from
Yeah.
that. But the great thing about Hollywood Kills is that we all collectively, as authors, decided to give all the proceeds to LA fire relief
Yeah, that's
efforts. So,
wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, you can get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and everywhere.
Great.
I do have another book coming out in December called Pressure Point. It's the third in a series based on the special agent Michael Walker. My friend Jeff Ayers, you might
Yeah.
know Jeff.
Yeah. Mm.
Uh, he created the series and he wrote the first two books with John Land. And then
Oh,
John had to step away. And the first two books were very successful. And the first two books um,
is this like in
had
the
a
national park? National Park
exactly.
Institute?
They're set in the
Yeah, yeah,
national
yeah. Okay.
parks, and yeah, he's a park
Yeah.
detective kind of thing. And
Gotcha.
so, anyway, we were at BoucherCon in Nashville, and Jeff said, "Hey, man, could you come have lunch with me?" So anyway, I'm writing these books, and John had to step away. Would you like to come in and write the third one with me? And I
Oh,
said, "Wow,
nice.
Jeff, that's not really what I do, man. I kind of do these kind of straight ahead, LA crime." And he goes, "Well, I understand, but I was kind of thinking of doing it like a James Bond story." And I said, "I'm in."
Ding ding.
That I understand.
Yeah.
So we had a great time writing it, and it
Oh,
comes
good.
out. So it'd be the third installment of the Michael Walker National Parks Action Series, and that comes out on December 8th. And I hope to do
Okay.
a tour around that as well.
Oh, good. Well, maybe you'll come back and visit me again in December. That'll be a lot of
I
fun.
would be happy to. Maybe we can both Jeff and I can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Jeff. He's such a good, he's
Yeah.
another one of those good guys,
He's another one of those good guys. I haven't met a bad one yet in the
Yeah,
publishing world, I have to say.
wonderful.
And of course, I'm down here in Atlanta shooting Beyond the Gates and having a
Yeah,
great time doing that.
good, good, good. All right. Well, folks, be sure to order your copy of Hollywood Payback today. You can learn more about John by visiting his website at jonlindstrom.com, where you'll find all of his social media links, and they will take you straight to Noodle. Uh, John, thank you so much for joining me. It was just a real
Oh, thank
pleasure chat.
you. Thank you. I've had a blast.
Same here. That's it for today's high stakes story. Follow the show so the next episode lands right in your feed. And if you enjoyed today's chat, a quick rating or review helps new listeners find us. Visit tracydevlyn.com/podcast for show notes and links to today's amazing guest and their fabulous book. High Stakes is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Thanks for listening. Until next time, enjoy the adventure, everyone.